Mara lived in a small town where time moved slowly and memories stayed longer than people wanted. The town was called Ridgewood, a quiet place surrounded by fields, old barns, and dusty roads. Everyone knew each other's stories, even the parts that were never spoken out loud. Mara was one of those stories. She was 46 years old and lived alone in a small house near the edge of town. The house was old but strong, just like her. She woke up early every morning, before the sun fully rose, and followed the same routine she had kept for years. She made tea, watered her plants, and watched the light change across the land. These moments gave her peace. Mara worked at the feed store near the highway. It was not a fancy place, but it was important to the town. Farmers, ranchers, and truck drivers came there every day. She liked the smell of grain and wood and the sound of boots on the floor. The work kept her busy and grounded. People in Ridgewood liked to talk. They talked about weather, money, and especially about marriage. They often looked at Mara with a mix of pity and curiosity. Some whispered that she had waited too long. Others said she must be too difficult. A few assumed she had given up. None of them ever asked her how she truly felt. The truth was simple. Life had not gone the way Mara once imagined, but it had still given her many things. She had learned strength, patience, and self-respect. She had learned how to fix broken shelves and how to sit with silence without fear. Still, there were nights when she wondered what it would feel like to be chosen without conditions. At the store, men came and went. Some were kind, some were rude, and some barely noticed her. When they did notice her age, their interest often faded. Mara saw it happen many times. She never showed disappointment. She smiled and continued her work. One late afternoon, when the sun was low and the store was nearly empty, the door opened and a man walked in slowly. His boots were worn, his jacket faded from years of use. He moved carefully, as if each step required thought. Mara looked up from the counter and greeted him. The man nodded and walked through the aisles, studying the shelves like someone searching for more than supplies. His name was Luke, though Mara did not know it yet. He had recently returned to Ridgewood after years away. His ranch sat outside town, damaged and struggling, much like him. Luke picked up fencing wire and feed, then brought them to the counter. His hands were rough and marked by work. When Mara spoke to him, her voice was calm and friendly. Luke noticed that she did not rush him or speak down to him. It had been a long time since someone treated him like that. As Mara rang up the items, Luke glanced at her face. There was no false cheer in her expression. No judgment either. Just quiet confidence. He felt something ease inside his chest. When she asked if he needed help loading the truck, he hesitated, then agreed. Outside, the air was cool and the sky painted with soft colors. They worked together without much talk, but the silence felt comfortable. Before leaving, Luke paused and asked her name. She told him. He said thank you, but it sounded like he meant more than the words alone. He climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Mara standing there with a strange warmth she could not explain. That evening, Mara went home and cooked a simple meal. She tried to read but found herself thinking about the man from the store. Not his looks or his past, but the way he listened. The way he seemed tired but honest. Luke returned to his ranch as the sky darkened. The land around him was quiet and wide. His house showed signs of wear, just like the barn that still waited for repair. He sat on the porch and stared into the distance, thinking about the woman at the feed store. People often saw Luke as broken. They spoke about his losses and his struggles. But with Mara, he had felt normal. He had felt respected. It had been a long time since he felt that way. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had begun. Not loudly or suddenly, but gently. Like a seed settling into the ground, waiting for the right moment to grow. That night, both Mara and Luke slept with thoughts they could not name, unaware that their quiet lives were slowly moving toward change. The next few days passed quietly in Ridgewood, but something subtle had changed for Mara. She did not rush through her mornings anymore. She noticed small things she usually ignored, like the way sunlight touched the fields or how birds gathered near the fence behind her house. These moments felt fuller, as if her days had gained a little more weight. At the feed store, work continued as usual. Customers came in with their lists and their worries. Mara greeted them with the same calm kindness she always had. Yet she found herself glancing at the door more often than before, wondering if the man from that afternoon would return. Luke, on the other hand, struggled through his days at the ranch. The land needed care, the fences needed repair, and his body moved slower than it once did. His legs still gave him trouble, especially when the weather shifted. He worked anyway, because stopping felt worse than the pain. While repairing a section of broken fence, Luke thought about Mara. He wondered why her presence had stayed with him. It was not excitement or desire that filled his thoughts. It was comfort. A rare feeling he had not known in years. 2 days later, Luke drove back into town. He told himself he needed supplies, but deep down, he knew there was another reason. When he entered the store, Mara was restocking shelves. She looked up and recognized him instantly. Their greetings were simple, but something warm passed between them. Luke asked how business was. Mara asked about the ranch. The conversation felt natural, like it had already been waiting. Luke mentioned the broken barn and the damage left behind by the storm years ago. He did not complain or seek sympathy. He just spoke honestly. Mara listened without interrupting. That alone meant more to him than he expected. Before leaving, Luke asked if she knew anyone who repaired tools. Mara suggested a man in town and wrote down the name. Their fingers brushed slightly when she handed him the paper. Neither of them reacted, but both felt it. As Luke walked out, Mara felt a quiet pull in her chest. Not longing, but curiosity. She wondered what his life had been like before everything changed. She wondered if he ever smiled easily. Later that evening, Mara attended a small gathering at a neighbor's house. These gatherings were common in Ridgewood. People talked, laughed, and shared food. As usual, someone asked Mara why she never married. The question was wrapped in kindness but carried old judgment. Mara answered calmly. She said life did not follow schedules. The room grew quiet for a moment before conversation moved on. Still, the words stayed with her. Across town, Luke sat alone at his kitchen table, repairing a tool by lamplight. He thought about the way people looked at him now. With caution. With pity. He had grown used to it, but it never stopped hurting. A few days later, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain fell across the land, soaking fields and roads. The feed store closed early. Mara worried about the ranchers outside town. She especially thought of Luke. That night, Luke's truck got stuck in mud near his property. He struggled to push it free, his leg aching badly. Frustration crept in, followed by exhaustion. For a moment, he sat in the driver's seat, staring at the rain. The next morning, Mara learned about the storm damage. She asked around and heard about Luke's trouble. Without thinking too much, she packed food and drove toward his ranch. When Luke saw her car approach, he was surprised. He had not expected anyone. Mara stepped out, boots sinking into soft ground. She handed him the food and asked how he was holding up. Luke hesitated, then answered honestly. He admitted that some days felt heavier than others. Mara did not offer advice or solutions. She simply stayed, helping him clean up debris and organize tools. They worked side by side for hours. No pressure. No expectations. Just shared effort. As the day ended, Luke offered her tea. They sat on the porch, watching clouds move slowly across the sky. Luke finally spoke about his past, about loss and disappointment. Mara listened, not trying to fix anything. She shared parts of her own story too. The years of being overlooked. The quiet strength she had built alone. Luke looked at her then and said something simple. He said she was not invisible to him. The words stayed with Mara long after she drove home. That night, both of them understood something important. This was not about age or damage or missed chances. It was about being understood without needing to explain. And that understanding was growing stronger. After the long day at the ranch, life in Ridgewood did not return to normal for Mara or Luke. Something quiet but powerful had shifted between them. It was not excitement or rush. It was a steady awareness of each other that stayed present even during silence. Mara returned to her routine at the feed store, but her mind wandered more often. When she swept the floor or stacked bags of grain, she found herself thinking about the sound of Luke's voice on the porch. Calm. Honest. Unafraid to show where. She realized that she had never met someone who spoke so openly without trying to impress. People in town began to notice small changes. Mara smiled a little more. She laughed more easily. When asked about her weekend, she simply said she helped a friend. She did not explain further. She did not feel the need to. Luke worked harder than before, not because the ranch demanded it, but because he felt purpose again. He fixed fences slowly, taking breaks when his leg needed rest. Instead of pushing through pain in silence, he accepted his limits. This was new for him. One afternoon, Luke drove into town again. He stopped by the feed store, not for supplies this time, but because he wanted to see Mara. When he entered, she was helping a customer. Luke waited patiently near the counter. When Mara noticed him, her face softened in a way she did not expect. She finished her task and walked over. Luke asked if she would like to visit the ranch again, not to help, but simply to share a meal. Mara paused. Invitations like this used to make her uncomfortable. They often carried expectations or judgment. But Luke's tone held none of that. He was not asking to take something from her. He was offering space. She agreed. That evening, Mara arrived at the ranch just before sunset. Luke had prepared a simple meal. Nothing fancy. Just honest food made with care. They sat at the table, talking about small things. Childhood memories. Favorite seasons. The ways people change over time. Luke shared how he once believed strength meant never asking for help. Mara shared how she once believed love only belonged to the young. Neither of them laughed at the past. They respected it for what it taught them. After dinner, they walked slowly across the land. Luke explained what the ranch used to look like before the storm. Mara listened, imagining the place full of life and sound. She saw the pride Luke still held, even after loss. At one point, Luke stopped and looked at Mara. He said something that surprised her. He said he felt whole when she was near. Not fixed. Not saved. Just whole. Mara felt tears rise, but she did not cry. She placed a hand on his arm, steady and warm. She told him that he made her feel chosen, not because she was useful, but because she was herself. The moment was quiet and meaningful. No rush followed. They did not promise anything. They did not define what this was becoming. They simply stood together, letting the feeling settle. In town, people began to whisper. They saw Mara's car near the ranch. They saw Luke walking beside her at the market. Some judged. Some questioned. Some assumed things they did not understand. One afternoon, a woman at the store made a comment about Mara being lucky to have attention at her age. The words were meant as praise, but they carried old harm. Mara did not react with anger. She simply said that love was not limited by numbers. The woman had no reply. Luke faced his own challenges. A man at the repair shop joked about him settling for someone older. Luke responded calmly. He said he did not settle. He chose. That word stayed with him. As weeks passed, Mara and Luke grew closer through shared moments. They fixed broken chairs together. They walked in the evenings. They sat in silence when words felt unnecessary. Each moment built trust. One night, Luke admitted his fear. He feared being a burden. He feared his body would fail him more with time. Mara listened and held his hand. She told him that everyone carries weight. The only difference is who chooses to share it. Mara faced her own fear too. She feared being left once again. She feared being considered temporary. Luke told her that his life felt more permanent with her in it. The bond between them deepened, not through grand gestures, but through consistency. Through showing up. Through honesty. They did not call it love yet. They did not rush the word. But they both felt its presence growing, steady and real. In Ridgewood, seasons shifted quietly. Leaves changed color. Air cooled. Life continued. And in that steady movement, two people who had once been overlooked found something rare. They found belonging. As autumn settled over Ridgewood, change became visible everywhere. Trees turned shades of gold and brown. The air grew cooler, and mornings carried a sharp freshness. For Mara and Luke, this season brought both warmth and challenge. Their bond had grown strong through shared time and honesty, but life did not pause to make things easy. The ranch still demanded work. The town still watched and judged. And both of them carried fears that did not disappear just because they cared for each other. One morning, Luke woke with strong pain in his leg. It was worse than usual. He tried to stand and nearly fell. Frustration filled him. He had worked so hard to rebuild the ranch and his sense of worth. Now his body reminded him of its limits. Mara arrived later that day and noticed the tension immediately. Luke tried to hide it, but she saw through him. She asked him to sit and rest. Luke resisted at first. He did not want to appear weak. Mara spoke gently but firmly. She reminded him that strength also meant knowing when to stop. Luke finally agreed. As they sat together, he admitted something he had never said out loud. He feared that one day Mara would see him as a burden. He feared holding her back from a life she deserved. Mara listened closely. Then she told him about her own past. She spoke about years of being made to feel unwanted. About how society had quietly told her that her time for love had passed. She explained that what she wanted now was not freedom from responsibility. What she wanted was truth and partnership. Luke looked at her and realized she was not there because she needed him to be perfect. She was there because she chose him as he was. In town, rumors continued to spread. Some people said Mara was wasting her time. Others said Luke should have looked for someone younger. These words reached them both, sometimes directly, sometimes through silence and looks. One evening, Luke suggested attending a local gathering together. Mara hesitated. Public attention had never been kind to her. Luke understood her fear, but he also wanted to stand beside her openly. They decided to go together. The gathering was held in a large hall filled with familiar faces. When Mara and Luke entered, conversation slowed. People watched them walk side by side. Some smiled politely. Others whispered. Luke kept his posture calm. Mara held her head high. They greeted people with respect and warmth. At one point, an older man approached Luke and asked if he was serious about the relationship. The question was not meant kindly. Luke answered clearly. He said he had never been more certain about anything. Nearby, a woman asked Mara if she was afraid of being hurt again. Mara replied that fear did not protect anyone from pain. It only protected them from living. As the evening went on, the tension eased. Some people began to see what they had missed. They saw two people who listened to each other, who laughed quietly, who shared glances filled with understanding. When they left the gathering, Mara felt both tired and relieved. Luke squeezed her hand and thanked her for being brave. Mara smiled and told him that bravery felt easier when she was not alone. Days later, Luke received news that part of his land might be sold if he could not make certain repairs. The pressure weighed heavily on him. He worried about the future and about what this uncertainty meant for Mara. When he told her, he expected concern or doubt. Instead, Mara offered help. She used her savings to support the repairs, not as a sacrifice, but as an investment in their shared future. Luke struggled with accepting it. He did not want to take from her. Mara reminded him that partnership meant building together. After much thought, he accepted, promising honesty and shared responsibility. They worked together to repair the barn. Friends slowly joined to help. Some came out of curiosity. Others came out of respect. The ranch began to look alive again. During one quiet moment, Luke asked Mara if she regretted choosing this path. Mara answered without hesitation. She said she had never felt more aligned with her own heart. As winter approached, their connection deepened further. They talked about the future carefully, realistically. No grand promises. Just shared goals and mutual care. Luke told Mara that she had given him something no one else had. Not rescue. Not pity. But belief. Mara told Luke that he had given her the same. Together, they learned that love did not erase hardship. It made it bearable. And in a town that once believed some chances had passed, two people proved that meaning did not follow rules. It followed truth. Winter arrived slowly in Ridgewood, bringing cold mornings and quiet nights. Frost covered the fields, and smoke rose gently from chimneys across town. Life felt slower, but for Mara and Luke, it felt fuller than ever before. The ranch stood stronger now. The repaired barn held firm, and the fences no longer leaned under their own weight. Luke moved carefully, but with confidence. He had learned to respect his body instead of fighting it. Mara spent more time at the ranch, balancing her work at the store with life beside Luke. They did not rush into change. They allowed life to unfold naturally. Mornings were shared over warm tea. Evenings were spent talking softly or sitting in comfortable silence. These moments mattered more than any promise. The town had changed too. People still talked, but their words carried less edge. They had seen Mara and Luke through seasons of work and challenge. They had watched them show patience and respect. Slowly, judgment softened into acceptance. One afternoon, Mara stood alone in the feed store, organizing supplies. A younger woman entered and asked her for advice about life and choices. The question surprised Mara. She realized that her story had quietly become a source of strength for others. She answered honestly. She said that worth did not fade with time. It grew when one stayed true to themselves. That evening, Luke prepared a small fire outside the ranch house. Snow fell lightly, covering the ground in white. He asked Mara to join him outside. She wrapped herself in a warm coat and stepped into the quiet night. Luke spoke carefully, not with grand words, but with honesty. He told her that he had spent years believing he was finished. He believed loss had defined him. But with her, he had learned that life could still open new paths. Mara listened, her breath visible in the cold air. She told him that she had spent years feeling unseen. She believed love had passed her by. But standing there with him, she felt fully present in her own life. Luke reached into his pocket and held out a small, simple ring. Not expensive. Not meant to impress. Just a symbol of choice and commitment. He asked her if she would continue walking through life with him, building slowly, honestly, and together. Mara did not cry. She did not hesitate. She smiled and said yes. They did not announce it loudly. They shared the news quietly with friends and neighbors. Some smiled with surprise. Others nodded with understanding. The moment did not belong to the town. It belonged to them. Spring came early that year. Snow melted into soft earth, and green returned to the fields. The ranch felt alive again. Mara began helping more at the ranch while still working part-time at the store. Luke found balance between work and rest. They faced challenges, but they faced them together. Some days were difficult. Some nights were filled with worry. But neither of them felt alone anymore. One evening, they walked across the land, watching the sun set behind the hills. Luke moved slowly, and Mara matched his pace. Neither needed to hurry. Luke told Mara something simple but true. He said she was perfect for him. Not because she fit an image or expectation, but because she saw him fully and stayed. Mara replied that he was perfect for her too. Not because he was strong in the way others expected, but because he was honest, kind, and present. They married quietly at the ranch with a small group of people who mattered. No show. No pressure. Just warmth and truth. As years passed, Ridgewood remembered their story. Not as a surprise, but as a lesson. That love did not belong to youth alone. That healing did not require perfection. That timing did not follow rules. Mara and Luke lived their days with intention. They worked, rested, and cared for each other. They laughed often and faced difficulty without fear. In the end, their story was not about age or brokenness. It was about choosing each other when the world expected nothing. And in that choice, they found everything.